Policy and Accountability Committee. I note we are meeting on the vernal equinox, so please let me wish a happy Nowruz to everyone celebrating Parsi New Year. Before we begin, there are some housekeeping points to cover. This meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, so by taking part, you're consenting to being recorded. Please can officers and guests introduce themselves before speaking for the first time and press the speaking button on their microphone stand. I say this because I missed this at one point in the last meeting. And if the fire alarm sounds, which has happened before, either continuously or intermittently, I will adjourn the meeting and officers will direct you to the assembly point in Shortland Road. Please leave in an orderly fashion by the nearest exit, which is in the lift lobby and down the stairs. There are tea, coffee and biscuits at the back of the hall. Please help yourselves, and toilets are in the lift lobby. So let's proceed to the agenda. Apologies for absence. I've received apologies from Councillor David Morton. And I think that's it. Lovely. Number 2, declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest? No, lovely. Item 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of January 2023. Are there any matters arising?
Yes, Chair. As you know, the Richard and John Pixon very kindly covered up, covered in the problems that we'd had with the previous meeting where they hadn't reported back. So they've done several reports which they've included in in attachments to the minutes, and I would like those attached to the minutes, although they were sent as secondary items. There's a couple of issues as we read through these ones, which in particular were related to the damp and mold problems. Now, in the intervening time, the government has revised its rules and regulations, and they published these on February the 23rd of this year. And in those regulations, they're referring them back to the social tenants housing standards, which in fact are contained in the original Decent Homes document 2006, which is directly referenced in both of those letters. Now, there is a problem that needs to be addressed somewhere, because if we look at the voids question as well as the stock condition and disrepair questions, they are both using different standards, and none of those standards are bolting onto the Decent Home standard. So I should imagine over a period of time things have just got lost in a bit. But I think there's a need for, rather than going into specific detail, there is a need to have those coordinated. So we've got a clear set of standards that the voids, repairs and major projects are all working to, so that we do the same repairs. The other one was the issue about the carbon emissions. And we've been given a figure in here of, I think, 40 kilotons of CO2 coming from council housing. However, they've used a different calculation in this instance. So rather than just using the CO2 that we produce on site, they're weighting that against the government's figures for electricity consumption, which is not really what we're doing in the borough. We're trying to reduce the CO2 emissions in the borough rather than at the power stations, which could be anywhere else in the country. And the other one was the insulation of properties, which they said they're aiming at 165 kilowatts per metre per annum to reduce that. But they said that's an average over 6 different property types, but they haven't said which property types they are. So we don't know. And as we know, we've got, I can think of about 20 different property types. And we've got a significant number of sort of older solid brick buildings that have chimneys and that kind of thing, which are quite a problem to insulate. And would never, ever, ever get near that target without some really serious remedial action. I'll leave it at there because I suspect the officers will offer to take this up at a later date because obviously Richard and John aren't here. So I'll leave it at that point, if I may. And once again, thank you very much because those two reports, all the reports submitted and answers submitted by Richard Buckley and and his colleagues are very much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. We have Richard Shway, who is the Interim Director of Housing. Richard, would you like to say a word on that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Councillor Alexander, yes, we will take on board everything what you said, and we are looking to make sure that in the next forward plan that we will address those issues you've mentioned and look at the types of housing what you've said. The other thing is that I will also double check with colleagues in the climate change team to make sure that the information what they are saying collaborates what we are doing as well, because we need to have that joined up process, and we all need to ensure that we achieve the carbon neutral target of 2030 as well. So that's all I was going to say, Chair.
Thank you very much. So can I ask members if they now agree the minutes with that amendment? Yeah. Agreed?
Agreed.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, so moving on. Before we ask officers to address the committee, I'd like to say just a quick word about our purpose here. We are all dedicated and committed ward councillors, and we are often minded to illustrate our questions and discussion with the experience of residents in our communities. We raise questions that pertain to operational oversight and casework, and it is well within the scope of this committee to monitor the administration of all aspects of housing. But this isn't our principal function. We are convened to develop key policies for the council on behalf of and with residents. Our function is to make recommendations to the Cabinet, to review the impact of decisions and policies, to scrutinise decisions in the interest of residents, including decisions made by partner organisations, perhaps to challenge assumptions behind policies and to monitor spending. It is my intention to bring to this committee items that are in the executive pipeline so that members and residents may have a chance to scrutinise and question strategies, and the members can make recommendations to enhance policy. At our last meeting, Sukhvinder Khalsi talked to us about £17 million lost to the HRA through central government rent reductions. We are all very aware of the appalling economic situation this country faces and the uphill battle our residents are facing. I hope we all recognise that there has to be a balance between raising the money needed to provide good homes for everyone and the falling living standards and rising costs of living faced by our residents. So I suppose what I wanted to say is we play a crucial role in helping ensure policy and strategy is sound and that this council is spending the funds it has well and wisely. This administration is committed to investing £1 million a week to improving homes, greening the housing stock and ensuring 4,000 new homes are underway in the next 4 years. And we are obliged to understand and scrutinise each of these strategies for our residents. We will be bringing each to committee this year, beginning this evening with the development programme. I've allocated the majority of our time to listening to officers and partners and for questions. The report will be presented by the Strategic Head of Regeneration and Development, and we will also be hearing from Neil Campbell, Ona Osman from BPTW Architects, and Emily Mansfield and Andy Yates from Sustainability Consultants, Culford Seedon. And welcome, thank you for coming. Before we do, I have a quick word on homelessness and repairs. Now, at the outset, sort of back in July, I committed to bringing both to each meeting in some form. In particular, I am looking forward to officers bringing forward a report on the key strategy changes that are being relied upon to make the significant improvements needed for repairs. But right now, I would like to ask Richard Shway, the new Interim Housing Director, to address the committee with a short introduction. Richard, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my name is Richard Shway, the Interim Director of Housing for Hammersmith and Fulham. For people who don't know me, my background is in general management of local authorities, where previously I was the Deputy Chief Executive of a place in St Albans City and District Council. I did housing regeneration schemes, and I also dealt with a lot of housing complaints, stage 2 processes. So that's one of the reasons why I'm here today as the interim director of housing. What I was going to do tonight is just give you a quick update about what we've actually been undertaking in the housing department on how we're looking at things, and address several top priorities with a strong focus on fixing repairs as our number 1 priority. But before I delve into our approach to housing, I just wanted to explain about what we're also doing overall in the housing team. We're ensuring that we have a proper management team that drives improvement. We are aiming to establish a strong portfolio of management systems for housing with the economy by the end of June 23, which leads us into making sure that at the next meeting that you have proper papers in place where you can actually discuss about the voids, damp and mould, and also the issues which you've referred to previously in Councillor Alexander about repairs and disrepairs. The other thing what we're also focusing on is the strategic financial approach. There needs to be an improved coordination between our colleagues in finance and ourselves, and we're focusing on areas about capitalisation, including repairs, costings about downstream failure costs from repairs, identifying operational efficiencies, and also look at the good work what we've done over this year about digitalisation, and that will help us with our decanter allocation policies. The third aspect what we're looking at is our general repairs approach. We're looking to tackle strategic challenge and look at how we can actually do that through our stock take and reviews, not just having annual conversation with our contractors, having regular monthly meetings with our contractors, and also look at additional contractor capacity, which will ensure that we implement a succession plan for our primary contractor and address the damp and mould cases through a cross-council leadership approach. The fourth area of work which we're undertaking at the minute is our void management. Our focus is about end-to-end letting management, void turnarounds and contract management, like a property business should do. The fifth thing is about looking at decant and temporary accommodation service, and that will address the demand and choice, and also look at how we can actually improve our limited supply and also our policy position and delivery. Now, the other thing what we're also looking at now is our core performance, and we're establishing a dedicated team to monitor and manage the performance on our patch contractors and their subcontractors, setting clear targets, expectations for quality and time span. This will ensure that repairs are completed efficiently and effectively, reducing the need of additional intervention, which I know has caused a lot of concern for councillors, and we need to do things better, and I appreciate that. The other thing what we're also looking at is our disrepair cases. We need to understand the disrepairs, and we also need to make sure that people are our focus and not just the process. We need to become a lot more people-centric, and that will also improve the impact and the quality of life of our tenants and leaseholders. We need to do that in a proactive approach to identify and address disrepairs cases, utilising the data-driven decision-making, and also looking at how we can actually prioritise and allocate resources in a timely fashion. And then, as I mentioned before about people-centric, it's also about ensuring that we have an improved customer service and dealing with complaints in the housing ombudsman management process. This is a key aspect of addressing our repairs and ensuring that our tenants and leaseholders feel heard and supported. We are going to invest in improving our customer service and complaints handling process with a focus of early resolution and transparent communication, which I know that in the past we haven't done well, but we will improve. This will also involved in working with the housing ombudsman management with repair service to ensure that complaints are addressed efficiently and effectively, and also to support our focus on fixing repairs that will implement several initiatives and aim at improving our overall performance at our repairs service. That is by increased transparency and accountability, and also making sure that we will implement a system of tracking the progress of our outcome of the repair works enabling both our departments and tenants and leaseholders to monitor the performance of contractors, and more importantly, make sure that leaseholders and tenants can tell us where we've failed and where we need to improve. This will ensure that a proper streamlined process occurs and also improve communication, which I do know that has been a failure and we need to improve on. And by streamlining our process and improving our communication channels between our stakeholders involved in repairs, we'll reduce our delays and increase the efficiency of our repair service. This will ensure and foster better collaboration with contractors, tenants, leaseholders, and housing staff. By doing that, we aim to have a proactive maintenance, preventive management of measure management that will ensure that that will lead to cost savings and improved service quality for our tenants and leaseholders. In conclusion, I just would like to say that fixing repairs has to be our #1 priority. This will demonstrate our dedication to provide better support, reduce our inequalities, and create ladders of opportunities for our tenants and leaseholders. But I think the most important thing is the proof's in the pudding, isn't it? And we need to show to councillors, tenants, and leaseholders that we will ensure that we improve our service delivery. Chair and councillors, I'm open to questions.
Thank you very much. Councillors, Councillor Alford.
Yes, good evening. We have not had regular updates on the repairs. It has all been brushed, I'm afraid, as far as I'm concerned, every time I ask questions, just brushed away. I understood at the beginning of this year, we would have regularly quarterly updates on the repairs and any improvements. Until today, we haven't had it. So I do hope that you keep to that. And I will certainly, as you're probably aware, be holding to you at every account. Secondly, I appreciate what the chairman says about what she proposes to do, but I was always my understanding that the opposition could request that certain items could come for scrutiny. Clearly, you've changed your mind on that. I have asked for things. Every time I ask, I don't get it. So if I'm to understand, it's pointless me making requests.
Councillor Alford, would you just clarify what the items are that you would like, that you've mentioned bringing? I haven't seen those in the minutes.
Well, I've written to you, but I've asked for a regular update on the HRA account. You know that. I raise it every committee meeting. I had asked for a more detailed update on voids. I'd certainly asked for a regular quarterly update on the repairs. And after that, I rather gave up because I wasn't getting any answers and I was just blown away. You know, we are not here as a committee to laud the administration. We're here to hold the administration to account and act for our residents. So we are not the cabinet.
Thank you for making those points, Councillor Alford. As I said, our function is to make recommendations to the Cabinet, to review the impact of decisions, to scrutinise decisions in the interests of residents, to monitor spending. We're not really specifically here just to review operational matters and how officers are working. Our role here really is looking at policy and accountability of policy. So I hear what you're saying about voids and repairs. I'm very keen that we bring a report to committee, which looks at the strategy for approaching and improving them. I haven't been asking officers for detailed operational reports, and I don't intend to. As a member, all members can ask officers for any reports from the housing that they like. And I think I've said a few times that we'll bring the HRA in January, and that's our commitment. If we are looking at particular areas and we want to look at costings behind them, then we can do that, and we can look at what the impact of the HRA might be. But I don't think that it is good use of our time, officers' time, guest time, or residents' time to keep going with reviewing the housing revenue account as it stands.
Am I allowed to respond? The reason I keep on raising the HRA is because it has to find savings. It's not once a year we should know when these savings are being made. We have to do them on a regular basis. So that is, the other thing is, and this is not an attack on Mr. Shaw or any of the officers present tonight, but in the last 9 months, I have been asking for so much information and I have not had it. So while I contact senior officers, frankly, the response has been very, very disappointing.
Thank you, Councillor Alford. Richard, would you like to answer?
Yeah, Councillor Alford, as I said, apologies. You know, I haven't been here for the last 9 months. I've only been here for 7 weeks. But what I have said and what I'm honouring is everything what I said I would do. So everything what I've said in my statement, we will undertake. We will ensure that we will have papers for the 25th of July. There has been changes in the leadership and management team in the housing department, as you're aware, which I can't really say today. But
I'm not attacking you, Mr. Shaw.
No, I understand that, but I want to rest assure you and also all the other councillors at this meeting that we in the housing service will ensure that we will set out and deliver what we said we're going to do, and ensure that you will get the paperwork in a timely manner, and make sure that there are papers here for discussion, and myself and my other assistant directors will be accountable for those aspects. So that's the commitment I will be making, and all the assistant directors, if need be, will be at the next meeting if they've got a paper to provide.
Thank you.
Yes, please, Chair.
Councillor Alexander.
Richard, thank you very much for taking us through that and explaining it through. I think you've got the priorities in the right order, but you didn't necessarily say them in the right order, which is understandable. So the first priority is repairs. That's definitely what's going to be well received by residents. And then the idea of better coordination between leaseholders and tenants is very good, because sometimes we get into some ridiculous, almost legal and sometimes legal issues between what leaseholders want and think and what tenants want and think, whereas they really ought to be one bunch of residents. So I'm really pleased that you've got that one. The prioritising maintenance is truly correct, because we are essentially a maintenance organisation rather than I know there's some great people who are going to build some new things for us, but essentially our day-to-day operations is maintaining our standards. And I have noticed a few small changes that I think are in the right direction. Well, I've been dealing with officers with repairs, which is very encouraging. And we want to support whatever the officers are doing in that sense, but it seems to be quite contained at the higher end of management, and it hasn't gone down through the organisation. So we're picking on senior officers for some ridiculous things, really. I mean, it's getting done and they are getting it sorted out, which is a great improvement, but we don't want to have to keep putting that one in. And so we have the prioritising your maintenance and dealing with the disrepair cases, and the disrepair cases are really problematical, and we really don't want to have to be explaining to the Ombudsman about issues we haven't solved. And some of them are, I could have gone around there with a screwdriver and sorted it out myself, and we want to move on from that. And I know we've got a managing contractor issue in and around that. So, but overall, thank you very much, and I appreciate everything you've explained, and it is positive.
Thank you, Councillor Alexander. Councillor Sadiq.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Mr. Shaw, for your comprehensive introduction. I appreciate that you are here just for 7 weeks. Is more like a comments, is not, if you don't have an answer, you don't need to answer that. Just I hope you will, like you said, the repair services and the track system is very important, and especially in these circumstances when the people have a living cost is too high. I just want to mention for the vulnerables and the older people, if you have any special strategy or you have any priorities or you have any track systems, the delays we have a lot of complaints as a councillors because there's the delays plus and the vulnerables not being treated on priority and repairs tracking system. If you have answer, you can, otherwise just take as a comment. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. What I can say is that in my speech, I didn't really also say that I've actually managed property services for over 15 years in another authority as well, both overseas in Singapore and in this country. And what I'll be looking at is how we can actually look at data and make sure that we can actually address those issues, what councillors have brought up. I know that there is a number of casework which I'm seeing where, as Councillor Alexander said, what should have happened is somebody should have just gone straight in, fixed it, come back out and sort those things out. So what I'm looking to do is work with patch contractors where we can get them in and do that piece of work rather than it becomes it's like everything, isn't it? If you see something at home that you can actually fix, it's best to fix it straight away rather than creating a problem where it becomes a big problem and then you've got to bring more people to the table to sort it out. So that's my approach of the way I'm doing, and I'm also willing to meet up with yourselves to talk about some of the issues you're facing as well. So I'm happy to have those discussions as well.
Thank you. Are there any more questions?
No, Chair, but if I may make a comment, please.
Yes, please do.
Thank you very much. And just like to thank members for sharing their reflections, and thank you to our Interim Director, Richard Shui, for providing that introduction and overview of the work that's taking place to prioritise improvements within the repairs work specifically, but the work that's going on across the housing service in general. I think it's very helpful to also hear about the information that members would like to see at future meetings. So that will obviously be minuted. Thank you very much to the governance team for doing that. I also would like to say there's a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of making improvements and making investment in our properties. Chair, you've already emphasised that point at the start of this meeting. I think it's really important to emphasise, the lack of investment that the housing stock itself has had over many, many years, and the challenges that are now faced in terms of having severe budget cuts over the last 12 years within this local authority, as with many others, and trying to find that income and revenue in order to invest in the properties as well as the repair service to improve it. But I also wanted to make the point that, Chair, you have offered for scrutiny the repair service. We have had an update at a previous PAC meeting within this financial year to provide an overview of the work that's being done to improve the service. And yes, there's more to do and there's more to come. And as Richard Shui has outlined, that will be further discussed in the July meeting, where members will be able to scrutinise the work that's being done and what's to come and offer their feedback on that. So thank you very much, Richard, again for the update and the work to emphasise what's being done to improve the repair service and the work that's being done to work with residents to make sure that we're working in partnership to deliver effective services across the borough when it comes to housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ume, and thank you very much, Richard. As Councillor Ume said, significant challenges, and it's so very key that we look at those strategies and those policies that are going to bring all the difference to residents, and that's informing that strategy and informing those policies is, I think, where this committee can really help residents and really bring something to the table, and that's what we'd really like to see going forward. So thank you. If we can move now to the 5th item on our agenda, and an update on the council's development programme, and I'll hand over to Matt Rumble here. Matt.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the invitation to come and talk to this committee. We always enthusiastically like to talk about our development programme. Just to sort of set the scene, if that's okay, we have presented a report for consideration by the committee. What we've also done is to make it easier to digest today, we've prepared a presentation, and we'll talk you through that presentation, which covers all elements of the report you've already read. We're going to structure it into three parts. So I'll open the presentation. I'll talk through the development strategy and the programme overview, and then talk about opportunities within private developments and how private developers bring forward schemes in our borough, across London and across the country. I'll talk about how we work in partnership with housing associations and with the private sector. And then my colleague Peter, who leads the development team, is going to talk to you about how we deliver co-production in our development schemes, how we have responded to the Defend Council Homes policy, which Cabinet approved in January 2021. And then we have some experts here who are going to talk very enthusiastically about a project that we're all very proud of, which is the Hardtop and Lannoy development. And we've got Neil and Honor from the architects BPTW, and we've got Emily and Andy who work for Calford Seedon, and they have provided input into the sustainability and energy strategy for the scheme. And that element of the presentation will talk very much about how we are responding to the climate emergency through our development programme. And if we have time, if we haven't overshot the time allowed, we're going to return and just talk very briefly about a couple of other schemes that have been designed in a very similar way to Hardtop and Lannoy, which are coming forward at the moment and have been already submitted for planning committee's consideration. So I thought I'd just to help just set the presentation into 4 sections, and also to allow Peter to hopefully put the presentation onto the screen so you can all see it.
It was working before. We're just facing a few technical problems for some reason. I'll continue in the background, Matt.
Shall I start to talk? Because a lot of what I can say you can just listen to, and it doesn't necessarily rely on the visuals of the presentation. So as I said, the first thing I wanted to do was just to cover the development strategy of the council and the programme overview, and principally why we're doing development as Hammersmith and Fulham. So there are 3 principal sort of policy or strategic drivers for what we do. We have what's called the Building Homes and Communities Strategy that was approved in 2019, which really set the council on the journey of development. It said that the council as an organisation is going to design and deliver its own homes, build its own homes, and retain the affordable housing that it builds itself, rather than principally doing it with a housing association or partnering with a private developer and effectively disposing of its land. So the Building Homes and Community Strategy is the underpinning principle to everything we're talking about today. We also have the Housing Revenue Account 40-year business plan. So the second principal objective of why we do development is to provide a long-term return to the HRA. So that's something that enables the council, through its housing revenue account, to invest in its existing housing stock by developing its own housing stock. So it provides a robust financial return over the longer period of time to support the housing revenue account. And the third core limb of why we're doing this is to respond to the climate and ecology strategy that the council has approved. And that is about development in a sustainable way that reduces our carbon footprint, but also in return reduces fuel bills for people who live in our new homes. So who do we do this for? We do this for the local residents whose housing need can't be met by the private housing market. And we know the private housing market in Hammersmith and Fulham is one of the most expensive places in the country. I think it's either the 3rd or the 4th most expensive place to live. So what are we doing? So we have what we call our own direct delivery programme that currently includes 16 sites. One site has already been completed on Springvale Estate, which is not far from here, and that was 10 homes that was delivered as 100% affordable. About 65% of our homes that we are building are affordable. So that means that only 35% are currently market homes, and those 35% are built to help fund the affordable homes. There is no additionality. We're building new community facilities as part of our programme. So some of our schemes that we're going to talk to you about later on are building a new community hub, or building new schools, or building new adult education centres and nurseries. The current programme will be delivered probably over the next 0 to 7 years. So we've got some of our homes already complete. I'll talk to you about Springvale. The first phase of Ed City, which I'm going to talk to you about in a moment in a little bit more detail. First phase of 24 homes, we're going to be ready this summer. And then the entirety of our 16 or 17 sites, if you include the one completed already, will be delivered over the next 7 years. Not included in the presentation when it comes up on the screen, there is a map in the pack of papers we've submitted, which just shows where we're developing new homes and community infrastructure across the borough. So what it will show from that image is that we're doing it everywhere. There aren't particular areas or pockets we're doing it in. It's across the borough where there are opportunities, either on our estates or on land that the council owns, that we're delivering new homes. And the final and most important thing is how. How is that we are the developer. The council is the developer. We've taken quite a bold step to do it ourselves. And Peter and the team have been recruited over the last 2 to 3 years, and we're a growing team. And we've decided that actually, why should the council give away its assets to private developers, or even hand them on to housing associations, when it can deliver its own housing? We can employ the skill set to do that, and that's Peter and the team, and you'll hear from the architects we've employed on one scheme, to design our own homes, to appoint contractors to build them, to fund that ourselves with our own borrowing or from grants, and for those homes that we build to remain owned on a freehold basis by the council and occupied by people who are on the housing register, or if it's intermediate housing such as shared ownership, that they're available for people who are on our home buy register. So that's a very sort of broad description of the overview of the programme and the development strategy. So unfortunately, the next slide is quite a lot of detail. It's a list of all of the 16 or 17 sites that we have got in our development programme. It is in the papers. It is an appendix on the papers.
I think this is Appendix 1.
It was indeed. We've got here. I'm just going to pause to let that come up as a slideshow for a moment.
Apologies, technical fault.
So if you just pop next one and the next one. So hopefully that's much more interesting than just listening to me talk. So that is our direct delivery program. So that shows you on a site-by-site basis where we are designing and building our own homes. And you'll see the sort of very headline figures here that, as I said, 65% of those are affordable. And there is currently 1,133 homes that the council is building as developer. And on the far left-hand side of the screen, and I won't pick these out individually, you've got the sort of key milestones, the future key milestones for each of those schemes. So broadly speaking, when we're looking to submit planning on each of them, when we're forecasting starting on site, and when the estimated completion dates are. The second thing I just wanted to talk to you about is what we would describe as our partnership development projects. Now, our new approach is direct delivery, but there are some schemes that we will end up delivering in partnership with organisations. So you'll see there are 6 on that scheme. 3 of those, because of when they've started, have already been completed. So Lavender Court, which I think was with A2 Dominion, which was completed a good couple of years ago now. Emlyn Gardens, which was done with Shepherd's Bush Housing Association. And Mow Moleham House, which is on the edge of the Clem Attlee estate, which was done by Shepherd's Bush Housing Association. And that also includes a new office space for Action on Disability. So that's a sort of a legacy of an old programme where the council would work with housing associations. It would provide the land, the housing association would build the homes or the community infrastructure, and then the council would then be able to allocate people to those homes from its housing register. The 3 remaining, I think everybody's aware of the Civic Campus project, which is a JV with A2 Dominion, Watermeadow Court, another site, which is going to deliver 266 new homes, and Edith Summerskill House on the Clem Attlee estate, which has had some challenges with planning. We've overcome those challenges, and we're now working with Peabody. Peabody will take that site, build the site itself, and the council will have nomination rights to all of the homes that are built in those. So you can add another 692 homes to that 1,133 I've just described to give the overall programme of schemes we're delivering ourselves at the moment. Peter, next one. So just wanted to talk to you about affordable housing, because you'll often see there are lots of different definitions of affordable housing and it can get quite confusing. So what we thought was it'd be quite useful just to summarise these really simply. So the first form of affordable housing we deliver is what we call genuinely affordable housing. Now, the GLA might refer to genuinely affordable housing as all affordable housing, but in Hammersmith and Fulham, we describe genuinely affordable housing as social rent, so a council rent, or London affordable rent. And they're typically between 20, 25 and 40% of what you would pay in the market for rent. So they're the lowest form of affordable housing. And that is that's the majority of homes we want to build where we possibly can. The next tranche of homes we would describe as intermediate affordable housing. And they're aimed at people who aren't necessarily eligible for social housing, but their housing needs can't be met by the open market. So that might be tenures such as shared ownership, shared equity, or London living rent. So they're sub-markets. The rent might be between 80 and 60% of market rent, slightly significantly below what market is, but slightly above social rent. And all of the homes that are built, whether the council build those homes or whether developer housing associations build those homes, all of those are let or matched through the council's home buy team that allow people who live and work in the borough, key workers, to get access to that form of affordable housing. The third is market sale homes. So the council will deliver some market sale homes. As I mentioned before, those market sale homes help fund the affordable homes. The council will generally sell those on a leasehold basis and retain the freehold. So that where the market sale homes are built, the council retains the freehold and still provides services to those individuals. So very simply, those are the three sort of general tenure brackets that we talk about when we talk about affordable housing. This slide, really high level, but what it aims to show is the degree of cost of our programme as it currently stands. So think of those 16 sites we're working on at the moment. The overall cost, if you consider all of the inputs, is about 505 million. If you shift over to the right-hand side, the value of that development is around 685 million. And of the costs, there is about 55 million, which isn't just housing and the environment for the housing, so the public realm and play space. That's about 55 million of new additional community infrastructure. So new community buildings, nursery schools, that sort of thing as well. So it's not just funding housing, the programme also funds community infrastructure. The three other boxes, you can see the two in the middle, are how we help to fund that 505 million of development costs. So we apply for grant from bodies like the GLA, and we use that grant to help subsidise the cost of affordable housing. And we used money that's is income to the council, which is from the sale of right to buy properties. We can then reinvest in new affordable housing. And then there is Section 106 money that we can use from time to time, whether that's towards the cost of community buildings, or it might be that we can, after planning consent, use some of the money we've got banked for affordable housing, Section 106 money, to buy out some of the market homes in our developments to increase affordable housing still. So that just gives you a very broad overview of some of the financial metrics of our development programme. Thanks, Peter. And just going through that sort of the tranche again of the ways in which we as an organisation can work to deliver new affordable housing. So I thought to frame, we talk about how the private market very generally deals with affordable housing. So what you will often see is the private market will obviously look to maximise profits for its owners, for its shareholders, and in doing so will look to deliver the minimum amount of affordable housing. Now, the council's policy is a starting place of 50%. The mayor's policy is a minimum of 35%. We as the council, we deliver 65% across our programme. So what would happen is when a developer puts in their application, they would negotiate with the local authority, through the local planning authority, the amount of affordable housing that can be delivered. They'll either deliver that on site as part of their scheme, or in some circumstances, that will be commuted to a sum of money that's paid to the council that the council can then invest in affordable housing in other sites. If the developer decides, and with the local authority, the agreed strategy is that the affordable housing is delivered on the site, they'll generally build it and they'll sell it to a housing association partner who'll buy it from them for a price, and then they will become the landlord for that affordable housing. Now, there's been some changes in that market in recent times. What we've seen is lots of the large housing associations, large and small housing associations, have got quite large capital investment bills around compliance and fire safety. So there are fewer and fewer housing associations that are now buying those Section 106 schemes. So the market is getting smaller. So one of the council's strategies is that we can do that. So we could maximise the amount of affordable housing that the council owns in the borough by working with private developers to say, we'll come and we'll talk to you about a price for that affordable housing. We could then buy it, we could let it to people on our housing register, and it can form the basis of our housing stock moving forward and can be used for future investment. So that is something we are looking at now as the market for that is growing. And there are a couple of schemes that we are talking to with private developers at the moment that may come forward in the near future. Okay. So the second thing I wanted to talk about was partnership and give you an example of a partnership delivery project. So I'm sure you know about Ed City. Ed City is a scheme that we are delivering in partnership with ARC. It is a site which is formerly an education space principally, and there had been some adult learning on that site. We've worked over the number of years with ARC to master plan the site, and we are jointly delivering a new scheme. At a very headline level, the scheme will replace the primary school. It will become a 2-form entry primary school for 480 young people in the borough. We're going to expand the nursery that's there at the moment, moving that from about a 40-place nursery to a 75-place nursery. The adult education space that the council delivers, there'll be a brand new adult education centre. That will become a space for 120 adult learning individuals to learn new skills. The council will get 132 new affordable homes. All of those through this scheme are affordable. There's no private in this scheme. We're working with Onside to build a first youth zone in the area. So that'll be activities for young people, which includes a multi-use games area. There's going to be new affordable office space, as well as a head office for ARC and other organisations of a like mind. And importantly, some new public realm. Now, Ed City as a site is on the boundary of White City, the innovation district in White City. If you go along Wood Lane, you'll see everything happening, new developments, James, Westfield. The other side of Ed City is the White City estate. So one of the most important elements of Ed City as a scheme is it is a physical connection between the White City estate and the west of the innovation district. There is an enormous boulevard that will create that new space, the new gateway into the area, which we think as an organisation, as a piece of public realm, is a really important project. So I've talked a lot about it, and I know that we don't have a huge amount of time. Told you I'd be enthusiastic, but here's a couple of slides just describing what Ed City will look like. So Block C, the yellow, is the new office for ARC. Block B is the youth zone. Block A is the new primary school, and then the pink blocks you'll see are the new homes that will be built there. And underneath Block E1 and Block E2 is the adult education centre, and Block D is the new nursery. Very quickly, headline timetable. Phase 1 is on site, and that's due for completion this summer. And that for the council will be 24 new affordable homes. The new office and the school and the youth zone are also built. Phase 2 is principally the council's benefit from this scheme. It's 108 new affordable homes, the new adult learning centre and the new nursery. And that's due to start on site this summer, and it will be complete within 2 years. And then overall, with the new boulevard completed, we're looking at November 2025 for that scheme to be completed. And that is a scheme that we are jointly investing with our partners at ARC to deliver. So it is a partnership scheme. Here's a picture from a couple of months ago, and what you can see, other than a big crane, is on the left-hand side of the picture. I think it's left. Yep, is the new office. The white metal building in the middle, that's the new youth zone, And on the right-hand side is the new school at ground floor and first floor, and our new homes that will be built as phase one. And in the foreground, that's the existing ARC school, which will move into the new school on the ground floor and first floor to enable phase two of the development to happen. And here are some lovely CGIs on a beautiful day in Hammersmith and Fulham. And here's a view from Australia Road looking at some of the housing and the school. The next one. This is the design for the new youth zone. This is the corner plot of the office itself. And then the new boulevard that connects White City Innovation District and Wood Lane through to the White City Estate. That's enough from me. I'm just going to hand over to Peter, the head of development, who's going to talk you through the principles of co-production in practice, focusing on a particular scheme.
Thanks, Matt. Sorry about the technical fault earlier. Hopefully we don't experience anymore. But my name's Peter Cook. I'm head of development. I joined about 3.5 years ago, and very proud of what we're delivering in Hammersmith and Fulham. So Matt's just described some of the overview of the development programme. So one of the things we've looked to do is make sure we embed co-production in everything we do. And basically, what does co-production mean? Well, it's about partnering the council with the diverse communities that Hammersmith and Fulham have, and supporting the commitment to shift the culture towards the co-production by doing things with residents and not to them. And so we're proud in the development team that we've really been at the forefront of that. As I said, the development programme does embed co-production in all of its projects. And we're specifically talking here about residents this evening, but I just wanted to emphasise that co-production also captures the wider community as well, and external stakeholders, and also internal colleagues, asset management, maintenance and repairs, we were just talking about earlier, housing. So all of our is truly co-production. And what it does, it makes sure or it encourages engagement with local residents to help shape the projects and the areas going forward. And that's right from the beginning, right through until the end. So right from appointing the design teams, we encourage engagement and everyone getting involved, residents getting involved in helping us choose the appropriate design teams, and also helping to shape the emerging proposals. And our colleague, our consultants this evening will give you a bit more information on how Hardtop and Annoy has been informed by such processes and engagement. And as just recently happened on Hardtop and Annoy, residents were involved in choosing the most appropriate principal contractor to deliver that on site. So as I said, the principles of co-production are reinforced through the implementation of the new Defend Council, well, relatively new Defend Council Homes policy that was adopted by the council back in January 21. We ensure that we follow all the principles of the the Defend Council Homes policy, and we involve residents in all co-production. So since its adoption, the wider regeneration development team have trained in the policy, and we were one of the first to actually implement it. So we're quite proud of that, and we continue to do so. And we've also provided development training for the housing reps forums and other such organisation and teams. The team produced a implementation guide which was approved by the Housing Reps Forum, which gives a bit more of a step-by-step process, so a bit more meat on the bone, shall we say, regarding the Defend Council Homes policy. And all of our projects do adopt it, especially obviously when it affects residents' homes or what they enjoy on HRA land. But what we do also is adopt the spirit of the policy on general fund land as well when we're looking to provide affordable homes. Just a bit on co-production, if I may, just to give you an insight of what we've been doing at White City Central, which is around the corner from Ed City, which Matt spoke about. Just a bit of an overview on White City very quickly. It's one of our biggest and most complex sites. It's looking to deliver 264 new homes. This is still at sort of pre-app stage, just to emphasise, of which half of those will be affordable, again broken down into 60% of those social rent and 40% shared ownership, and those percentage breakdowns are policy compliant and GLA compliant in that sense. And obviously Matt's spoken about what does social rent mean and what does shared ownership mean. Just as importantly as well, and something I forgot to mention on the previous slides, 10% of all of our homes will be fully accessible, and we're very proud as well to have set up the Disability Forum, where people with disabilities come along and input and inform the designs, and we actively engage with those as well. So that's something which we've been at the forefront as well. And 134 leasehold homes as well. Now, what we're also providing on the site is sort of a new community building that is the centre of the site, and again the community and everybody's been involved in co-producing that. And what do they want? What do they want going forward? What facilities do they want? And also the nursery school there, one elementary nursery school is going there as well. And then there's external sort of amenity space, shall we say. So it's an active community square to really place shape the community. There's a new adventure playground, outdoor gym, and some community gardens going there as well. Now, we actually, when we started White City Central, we actually started a White City Estate advisory panel, and actually that was set up before the launch of the Defend Council Homes policy. So I suppose we was a bit of ahead of our time in that sense, in that we'd already set up a residents group that would participate and engage with regarding it. And they helped to appoint the architects and other consultants right early on in the whole process back in when it started in January 2020. And since then we've held about 16 meetings with the advisory panel, and as I say, they've helped shape the designs, and these meetings are ongoing. This is just to date. So just to give a bit of an overview about how we have co-produced White City. As I said, we've set up the advisory panel back in January. We've had more than 50 public consultation and engagements events, including 11 exhibitions, and we have regular drop-ins. We've sent out 20 flyers, newspapers, and invitations to over 2,000 addresses, as well as we've done door knocking as well. We've reached over 1,200 local people and collected more than 1,400 comments. And 97% of those respondents to date, their addresses either live in the estate or within 1 kilometre of the site. So we are really connecting with people that it's important to. We've created a website and geotechnical digital promotion. We've had 26 sessions with on-site operators that obviously use all the facilities and amenities. And we've had other meetings with other community and council stakeholders. And we've had, as I said, 16 to date, 16 advisory panel meetings, and they're ongoing. So when we first started, the initial feedback we was getting back in November 21 was, how many people felt quite positive about the project that was emerging, and it was 39%. But just before Christmas, we regularly ask those questions and review, and that's gone from 39 up to now 64% of most people feel it's a positive project, and 20% of saying that it will actually be positive some way. So I think this shows how co-production can really, if you engage with the residents and go through the journey, and they start informing what's emerging, how that initial response can actually turn into an opportunity, and they see the real benefits that are coming out. So back in November 21, 50% liked the designs, where just before Christmas, 75% actually really liked the design. So I think that's some real tangible evidence of how co-production works in practice. These are just some sort of CGI pictures of the scheme. It's still being worked on at the moment, but I just thought I'd give you a sort of a taste of where we are at the moment. Another point is, what are we doing regarding responding to the climate and ecology strategy? I heard a few people mention that tonight. Well, everything we do in development, we obviously are underpinning the climate emergency 2030, and also aligning with Hammersmith and Fulham's climate and ecology strategy and the transitional targets up to 2030 as well. And each scheme is bespoke. It has its own set of opportunities and constraints, and therefore each scheme is continually assessed throughout the design. So right from the beginning through the different stages, to ensure that sustainability design is embedded right from the beginning, and the consultants will talk a bit more about that afterwards. And the performance is maximised at every stage. We deliver to enhance sustainability standards beyond those required at planning policy and building regulations generally on our new developments. And we achieve on average a reduction of 65% on-site carbon emissions. And what does this mean for, that's the output, but as an outcome, it's a home to somebody living there, and an affordable home. Well, it means that they actually should see about a 50% reduction on their utility and fuel bills, which is as well as living in a modern, resilient, sustainable home. However, on doing that, we've also got 3 schemes at the moment. Again, Hardtop and Lanoy, we'll go through in a bit more detail, but these are going to be delivered to an even more enhanced level, shall we say, of passive house standard, and they will deliver a significant reduction of CO2 emissions on site, 86%. Now, that's excellent regarding urban development, okay? And this reduction, obviously, because it's even more enhanced, does translate into an even further reduction in fuel bills for people, so tackling fuel poverty. And these schemes are seen as exemplar schemes, and I'm sure the consultants will tell you tonight, we are being seen as one of the leading councils leading the way in London on net zero, which we're very proud of. And this is now on the all these schemes are now on the Passive Trustees website as urban developments. I'm just going to talk a little bit, focus a bit on Hardtop and Lanoy. Just to give it a bit of background first, Hardtop and Lanoy had 2 towers, 14-storey towers on it previously, and the council decided to demolish the 2 blocks under health and safety grounds back in April 2019, when they contained 112 homes. And the blocks were subsequently demolished between May 2020 and February 2021. So it's been it's a redevelopment of a brownfield site, really. The redeveloping and enabling work, so some of the any sort of bits of contamination and other bits and pieces was also carried out between May 21 and 22. So what I intend to do now is hand over to our consultants to give you a bit more detail. Before I do that, I just need to stop this presentation and go into their one. So bear with me for, hopefully it works, for 30 seconds.
Thank you.
Chair, perhaps if I may, can invite our consultants to introduce themselves while Peter's pulling up the presentation.
Yes, please.
Sure. Good evening. My name is Neil Campbell. I'm a partner architect at BPTW.
Good evening. I'm Honor Osman. I'm a senior associate at BPTW.
Good evening. I'm Emily Mansfield, one of Cal Stevens' principal sustainability consultants.
Good evening. I'm Andy Yates. I'm a partner at Calford Seaton.
That's great. Chair, do you want me to carry on or wait for your colleagues to return?
No, please carry on.
Yeah. Okay. It will pop up in a second, hopefully.
They're very big files and they take time to upload. So bear with me 2 seconds.
we go. Excellent. Thank you. So just, Peter, onto the next one, please. So just setting the scene a little bit here. We've heard the kind of strategy side of the brief, but in terms of our brief, what was very clear from the council and their objectives was to aim for the highest level of carbon reduction. So we were aiming for zero carbon in operation. So that was always going to inform what we did from the very beginning. It was clear it was going to be a co-production process. So that was also embedded at the very beginning. And of course, we wanted to design and produce the highest quality new homes for the borough. So those are the three strands that went right through the whole process. So what we did early on was work with a resident steering group. You seeing that okay now? Yeah, great. And what that meant was what we needed to do was make sure we aligned the clear objectives from the council, but also with objectives from the steering group themselves. So these are residents that live on the estate or that had previously lived on the estate. One of the really important things that you saw in the previous slide was there were existing homes that were demolished before we started this process. So it was also important to try and engage with those residents because there was a right to return back. But also, I suppose one of the important lessons that we learned through this was there was a legacy of tall buildings on the estate that really kind of overshadowed some of the early conversations, and that was important to get over through this process. So we built up a really good rapport with the steering group and talked to them. It started really with education. We were starting with some workshops around what zero carbon actually means, what a co-production process means, and what we expect from both sides. And as I mentioned, there was quite a lot of history of the site to untangle and work our way through. But most importantly, we wanted to understand what the aspirations were from the residents themselves, so they could be absolutely bound into the process that we were starting. We were starting with a clean sheet and actually a completely clean site because the towers were demolished at that point in time. So what we wanted to do was have a joint ambition to deliver the highest quality housing, and that's what we did. And that came from the whole community. So the key outcomes that came from the early engagement process with this particular steering group were around accessibility. So the real problems with accessing the previous homes, accessing some of the existing homes that we were retained on the site. So this little diagram here shows the buildings, Donnelly Court and Chase Moor House, that would be retained on one side of the estate, and the cleared site that we had wrapping round after those tower blocks were demolished. So accessibility to the homes through the process of design, but also as the new homes could be built. But the site itself was quite inaccessible previously. There's a lot of level changes, and that's something that was very important and came across very strongly. The other few themes were around communal spaces for the whole community. So one of the things that was very lacking in its former layout were poor quality amenity spaces, inaccessible amenity spaces at all different levels. So that became a really important theme through the whole process of design, that we wanted to have a new communal space, not just for new residents, but for existing residents as well, and indeed the wider community. A safer environment was another key theme, which we often see, but I think it was obviously here as well, difficult to navigate access ways, narrow paths leading up to homes, something that we could certainly look at dealing with through the process. There was also wanted to a move away from buildings of height. I mentioned that legacy previously. So our brief was emerging about trying to find a proposal that did not rely on height, but achieving a level of density that was appropriate for the site. And you saw an early sketch previously, which came out of a very early engagement process, which you'll see informs, and you'll see the shape of the building and how that was realised through the process. So next slide, please, is a design timeline. So this is what we did over a period of time. You can't quite see that too well, but it's demonstrating there a series of resident engagement meetings that ran through the whole process leading up to a planning application. What we also did.
Sorry to interrupt. Is it possible to move to full screen?
without it disappearing.
I
Yeah.
just can't. I
Yeah,
can
very
try
small
again.
writing.
It just crashed when I did it last time. I will try again. So my apologies.
I think we're just being cautious,
Zoom in
aren't
or
we?
something.
Yeah. So this illustrates really the parallel processes, I guess, that we have to undertake through this process. So at the heart of it was the RSG meetings, which you can see running along the top there. We also were engaging with the Disability Forum, which we mentioned earlier. But simultaneously, there's also a pre-application engagement process for the local authority. So that happened all the way through. And so those two things need to run in parallel. And then the third line is the public consultation strategy. So that's the engagement beyond the estate in terms of the wider engagement process. So those things run in parallel. And so you can see the kind of the depth of that engagement through this illustration here. So on to the next one, please. So first principles of the site, considering the best opportunity here. So the top left shows the existing layout and plan form. So there were a few sort of key constraints you had to consider: retaining vehicular access to existing homes that I mentioned, and in particular to the west of the site. And also how you come off Dawes Road and allow continuous access to existing homes there too, because we were taking away some of the complicated levels that were embedded into the way that the former towers worked. The other thing here is looking at how we could consider the challenges of levels, but turn it into a positive thing and use that as a way of knitting the site back together through new, more accessible routes, but also delivering a central community amenity space. So that could be the sort of way that we deal gently with levels as opposed to more difficult ramps that existed previously. And then other constraints we had to consider in terms of retained trees and other underground services. And that led us to an approach. We've divided the site into two zones really, about how we could look at two blocks that began to form through that kind of design development process. On to the next one, please. Turning to massing, and important then to pick back up the kind of consideration for a passive house here and the highest level of sustainability. Part of that is very much about optimizing orientation and utilizing the sun and heating, etc. And Emily will come on to that shortly. So there were two distinct building zones formed, and that's what the top diagram there shows. But then we start to consider how you manipulate that and create courtyards within them, creating good light levels into them, creating private amenity spaces for those blocks in particular as well. Then we consider how building siting in a bit more detail. And something that came out of a wider consultation was around a discussion in particular, and the tensions we have through this design process about engaging it with the residents that live on the estate of what their particular aspirations are, but also engaging much wider with the whole community and what the aspirations of the wider community are. And sometimes those things don't align. And so there's a process to follow about navigating and finding the best and the balance between all those competing factors. And one of them was about the alignment of buildings onto a particular street and the consideration of retention of existing trees. And we debated that in both of those sort of areas and considered the building line should be moved towards Pellant Road, because that allowed a larger amenity space in the centre of the site, which was one of the main aspirations from the early discussions with the resident group. Then we considered how that massing might work across as the scheme develops in a little more detail, how the height should work, and considering very carefully in relation to sunlight, daylight, and impact on existing residents within Staybet and wider. So we considered moderate height within the centre of the site that tapered down to the edges. And that's something that came out of both of those kind of engagement processes. On to the next one, please.
I can ask if we can have a copy of the presentation added to the minutes so you could get a better look at it there.
That's okay, you can't do it.
If it's the text, I'm covering the text largely, so. Okay, no, that's okay, yeah. I mean, if there's anything to cover afterwards, obviously we can go back. A part of the engagement process, as mentioned, was that part of the wider strategy was in the inclusive design strategy and how we engaged in that process. So we also, as part of that kind of regular engagement with the steering group and the wider community, we're also engaging with the Disability Forum Planning Group, and they were a very important stakeholder in this. So we shared our early design work, and they were part of that more detailed design work, and with a commentary, which was a really good thing. And I think we made some very sensible decisions about how we treated that public realm, how we could create the most accessible environments possible, and change in particular the kind of landscape area for the better. So it became something that had a much more accessible accessibility at the core of it. And then finally, the final slide from me is just returning back to then how these strategies really came together. And so just reminding of the sketch, and apologies how small, but on the left middle there is a very early sketch done with the resident engagement group, with ideas around that community heart and how buildings might be formed, then through an iterative process to testing ideas and, you know, putting and considering building siting and massing to the bottom left. And then what you're seeing here is the planning submitted design. So there's the level of detail that you can see added there. And hopefully you can see the thread all the way through here from that engagement that's born out of the engagement. And so that what is at the heart of the scheme is this new community asset at the centre. And that's something that came very strongly through from the beginning. So I'll just hand over to Honor for more detail. Oh no, Emily, sorry, initially.
Thank you, Neil. So I'll be speaking about the energy strategy for Hartop and Illinois along with my colleague Andy Yates. Next slide, please. So as Peter mentioned earlier, Hammersmith and Fulham declared a climate emergency, and they're looking to achieve net zero carbon by 2030. And to help achieve that, they've developed a climate and ecology strategy action plan that outlines how they're going to achieve that goal. And part of that is decarbonising buildings. Next slide, please. Thank you. So what are the benefits and values of net zero carbon? So globally, about buildings are responsible for about 38% of carbon-related from energy used within buildings. And also about 91% of the world's population is subject to air pollution. And that includes London as well, because we do have a lot of air pollution within London and also noise pollution. So what are the benefits and values of net zero? So they can offer good indoor air quality, low CO2 emissions, lower energy demand as well, so affordable housing. And it also helps achieve those 17 sustainable development goals that are set out as part of the 2030 agenda for sustainable development. Next slide, please. Thank you. So part of the energy strategy, so we looked at the sustainability framework, which is required under planning set out in the Hammersmith and Fulham and also the London planning policy. So we can see here on the right-hand side, the energy hierarchy, and we can see at the top that there's B lean, and this is reducing energy demand through passive measures as much as possible. So that's looking at your building fabric and insulating your buildings using heat recovery technologies to help recover heat lost from buildings, such as ventilation. So instead of extracting all your air and all your heat out to external in your bathrooms or your kitchen, it's actually trying to recover that heat and put it back in the dwelling. And this all helps reduce the energy demands for space heating, but also helps reduce those running costs to the end user. The next step is be clean. So that's supplying energy efficiently. So this is looking at using communal heating systems rather than individual heating systems, and also moving away from mains gas. So looking at all electric heating systems. But obviously the thing to consider with electric heating is that the cost of electricity is that much greater than that of mains gas. So need to reduce energy demand as much as possible. So on the Hartop and Illinois development, we've looked at applying the passive house principles, and that's really insulating that building to reduce that heating demand. But the other benefit with passive house is it also looks at the wider energy uses. So it looks at your water heating and also your appliances and cooking as well. So what you use for your dishwashers, your washing machines. Unlike building regulations, that only really looks at your space heating and your water heating. So that's the other benefit of Passive House as well. And it applies that fabric first approach as much as possible. So we're looking at a very well insulated and airtight construction, and also concentrating on thermal bridging junctions. That's where your floor will meet your wall. There's usually a thinning of the insulation there. So it's just making sure to reduce as much heat loss through those areas as possible, because again, in building regulation housings, that's a large area of heat loss in those places. And then final stage of the energy hierarchy is Be Green, which looks at using renewable technologies. So in this case, on Hardtop and Lanoy, we're using air source heat pumps, which Andy will talk about in a moment, and also solar photovoltaic or solar panels to generate electricity on site. And then, sorry, that was not the final stage. The final stage is offset. So then any CO2 emissions left over is then paid through a carbon offset fund payment. Thank you. So a quick outline of the Passive House principles. So it encourages that low energy design. So as I mentioned earlier, it focuses on everything, not just space heating. It also looks at your water heating, your lighting, your ventilation, and your unregulated energy as well. So that's your appliances and cooking as well, making sure that everything's low energy and affordable for the end user. So you can see in this graph, this is demonstrates the space heating demand. So the space heating demand describes the amount of heat required to heat a home to a particular heating profile for a given set of weather conditions. The left-hand side of that graph shows a building regulations compliant home, and it shows a heating demand of 60 kilowatt hours per metre squared per year. Now, the issue with building regulations is that there's quite a big known performance gap, because they don't really go under rigorous testing. At as-built stage, you'd air pressure test it, see if it achieved that air pressure test rate that you had, and that would be it. So it's not really overseen that much on site. Now, for Passive House, it does go through rigorous testing. So it goes through third-party certification. During construction, it's observed very closely to ensure that what's been designed is actually installed, and therefore you reduce that performance gap. So what you design should be how it operates. Obviously, depending on occupant use, because somebody might want their heating on 24, whereas somebody else will put their heating on at 20. So we can see that when we apply the Passive House principles, that middle chart there is a low energy building, and that's got a heating demand of 30 kilowatt hours per metre square per year. So you're already halving that over the building regulations. And then when we look at Passive House Classic, which is Hardtop and Lanoy, we can see that the heating demand is then reduced to just 15 kilowatt hours per metre square per year. So it's really saving that energy for space heating. The thermal images on the right-hand side indicate why it's important to insulate. And we can see, especially on the bottom image, we can see where the intermediate floors are, where there's a greater heat loss around those cold bridging junctions. And the Passive House will help reduce those heat losses, and also within the corners as well. But again, unlike building regulations, Passive House also looks and concentrates on those building services, so insulating them to a very high quality to ensure losses across the system are reduced. And this is again improving the efficiency of that system. So as we move away from mains gas to electricity, it's very important to make sure that we make those systems as efficient as possible. So here we can see a form heat loss factor, and this graph demonstrates that the higher density you have in the buildings, the larger that building is, and the higher internal volume you have, the lower the form heat loss factor. So you don't have to put as much insulation in that building to achieve that 15 kilowatt hours per metre square per year space heating target. But further towards the top of the graph, we can see more small profile shapes. So we've got a cross at the top and just a little cube. They've got quite a high form heat loss factor, and that's because they have a lot of external area compared to their internal volume, and therefore they need more insulation to achieve that 15 kilowatt hours per metre squared. So the key to Passive House is to have a simple shape, and that helps with your form heat loss factor, and also to reduce difficult detailing for your thermal bridging junctions. The Hartop and Lannoy development sits between the 1.35 and 1.6 for those blocks. So it's good, in a good place in that chart, and that's because of the site constraints on the development site and achieving that lower rise buildings. Next slide, please. Thank you. So here's a nice little typical generic section of a house with the passive house standards. So we can see that the outside envelope is wrapped in a nice thick layer of insulation to keep that heat in. We also have triple glazing windows that are set back within the insulation layer. And again, this is to help reduce those cold bridging junctions and reduce heat loss through there. And the triple glazing also helps provide occupant comfort. So if you're in an older building and you sit close to a double glazed window, you might feel a bit chilly because you feel that cold radiant coming off the window. Whereas in a passive house, you should feel comfortable wherever you may be because you've got that nice airtight fabric, triple glazing, which you shouldn't feel that cold radiant coming off there. And the windows are set back in the insulation layer also to provide a deep reveal, and this helps with summer overheating as it provides shading around the window during the summer months when the sun's higher in the sky. But during the winter months when that sun is lower in the sky, it allows you to benefit from solar gains to reduce that space heating demand. So we're really trying to achieve an energy balance here, balancing our losses against our gains to reduce that space heating demand. Smaller windows as well, so minimizing full height glazing. Again, this helps with the detailing for the thermal bridging and also helps reduce the heat losses through the glazing as well on there. On Hartop and Lannoy, a majority of the developments are dual aspect as well, which help with that cross ventilation during the summer months to provide that fresh airflow and reduce those internal temperatures. Another key factor is externally supporting balconies, because again, that they have a huge, if you have a cantilever balcony, the supports will then go through the insulation and that causes a huge heat loss once again because of the thermal bridge. And so having them externally supported allows that insulation layer to be maintained, throughout the external wall. And then we can see on the bottom right-hand side, there's a little cube, and that's the mechanical ventilation with heat recovery unit, which Andy will go through in a moment. But it's important to have that as close to the external walls as possible to allow those intake and exhaust ducts from and to external to be as minimal as possible, because they again cause heat loss. So the whole point of passive house is just trying to reduce that heat loss and really optimize your space heating demands, your gains, and also your heat recovery technologies. Next slide, please. And I'll pass over to Andy.
Thank you. So within each home, there will be a mechanical ventilation and heat recovery installed. So essentially, these systems work by they extract the warm stale air from the kitchens and wet rooms, as well as supplying fresh air to the habitable rooms. So what the system does is it recovers the heat from the extracted air and blends it in with the supplied air, supplying warm air back into the property, which helps reduce running costs and obviously the residents' energy bills. So each of the units will be installed is rigorously tested and passive house certified. And the additional benefit of these units are they all have their own filters. So therefore, this provides healthy indoor air quality to each of the properties. As well as that, the MVHR does assist with the risk of mould in properties by constantly replacing the warm, moist air with clean, fresh supplied air from outside. So as part of the whole sort of ventilation design and strategy, it's the overheating aspect has also been calculated, just to really ensure there isn't an issue with summer overheating. This tested, the calculations are performed using sort of a weather data from 2050 to climate scenario, just to really sort of prevent any issues moving forward. These systems also have the ability for cooling units to be added as well if required. The systems themselves are relatively easy to maintain. It's just simple filters that can get extracted and cleaned by the residents, so it's quite straightforward system to use. Next slide, please. Sorry, next slide, please. That's okay. As part of the communal heating and hot water systems, we are going to be installing the air source heat pumps. These systems produce heat from the ambient air and generate hot water, which is then pumped into the thermal stores located in the plant rooms up on the roof. They're a lot more efficient than straight electrical heating due to their COP of 2.5, which is the coefficient of performance. So essentially what that means there is for every 1 kilowatt of energy put into these systems, you're getting 2.5 kilowatts of energy out of them. So the system's all part of the low temperature hot water, low temperature heat network, and it's distributed. They're located close to the plant rooms up on the roof, to, again, reducing distribution runs, minimizing heat losses. The system's then distributed through the buildings through vertical risers, which will serve 1 or 2 apartments on each floor. This minimizes the horizontal distribution of pipe work, which can also be a big issue with overheating, because obviously they've got pipe work running around at sort of 60 degrees, which could then, if not insulated properly, can obviously overheat areas. The whole system itself is designed to the CIBSE Code of Practice for heat networks of CP1, which essentially means it'll be a highly insulated pipe work and a high level of controls just to ensure it's a fully efficient system. Within each home, they will have their own heat meter, and they will be individually billed for the hot water that they use. So there'll be no instances of residents being mischarged for fuel. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the other part of the passive house principles is to use the renewable energy. As you can see from that image on the right-hand side, we've maximised roof layout for PV and covered there. So both solar photovoltaics. Essentially, these generate electricity, which is then fed back to the plant room and can assist covering the electrical consumption of the heat pumps. And I'll pass back to Anna. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. So moving into the architectural language that developed off the back of obviously the co-production process that my colleague Neil's touched on, and Calvert Steedens have gone into detail in terms of the passive house approach to design. It's very much developing then the architectural language around the passive house approach and understanding the obvious site constraints in terms of building massing, height, and the relationship with the surrounding buildings. As part of the passive house approach, as opposed to the more traditional, conventional boiler system that you would see sat in a basement of a building somewhere, very much the passive house approach was around utilizing technologies that are more open to the air. And as you can see from the diagram here, very much located in roof locations across the roof. So we have various points here, and here in relation to plant generation, air source heat pumps and heat buffer vessels, as well as electrical generation through photovoltaic cells, again, touched on by Calvert Steeden. But in terms of the dynamics of the approach to the design of the equipment and maintenance of these facilities is working very much with Hammersmith and Fulham's existing maintenance teams through a consultation process to understand the technologies, to inform them going forward what is changing, and working with them in terms to make sure that there is a dynamic relationship, not just in terms of introducing a design that it's completely new, but working with them in terms of creating a long-term maintenance plan with them. Accessibility to roofscapes as opposed to basements was also a key consideration. So in terms of taking staircases up to roof level, allowing access through stairways and walkways, for example, along here to then access and then step down into the roof areas, raising parapet heights so that you don't require specialist training for man-safe systems in order to access this equipment was a key part of that element of the design to bring forward this technology. In terms of the envelope design and the system parameters, as Emily's touched on, the key fundamental of the design for Hartep and Lannoy was a thicker wall, effectively blanketing the building in a higher level of insulation to then retain heat and reduce losses, which then reduces energy demands overall on the building itself. In terms of the balcony designs and fenestration, as again touched on, all of the balconies that you can see here are thermally broken in the sense that they are not connected back through the fabric. They're not penetrating through that insulation layer and carrying through the metal heat loss and air and heat transmission, or loss of heat, cold transmission through the building fabric. So they're all independently structured and stacked, hence the reason for the posts that you see on the diagram here. And that was another key part of it. Sun path analysis is a constraint that we very much worked with to develop the passive house principles, but obviously orientation and site location was a language that was developed through the resident steering group and the co-production process. And working with those principles, we developed a language in terms of the depths of window reveals, pushing those deeper in order to reduce heat gain, orientating the building, looking at methods and technologies for air circulation and movement within the flats. So again, maximizing dual aspects or as far as possible within the development of the design. So then looking at the active constraints of the site, we're not developing the truly optimized method of passive house in terms of a single rectangular box that's stacked quite nicely. We have to be realistic with regards to our constraints, working and feeding back from the public consultation process in relation to height, massing, addressing concerns in regards to overshadowing, setting back our building and accepting that there is a more detailed development work we have to do in terms of taking that thermal envelope line, wrapping it through the balcony and terrace spaces and up, was a balancing act and very much working with the constraints of the existing infrastructure and site around it to develop a pragmatic and realistic approach to passive house rather than a model theory. And that's part of the true balancing act of architectural design, in taking forward a new series of technologies to achieve carbon reduction aspirations, but also developing a language of architecture that achieves a right balance of aesthetic appearance to the buildings, at the same time as achieving a high thermal performance and useful and usable homes basically for residents in the future. And again, that's part of the thinking in regards to that dual aspect of approach and the internal planning of the flats, which again is slightly different in terms of our plant design and layouts. Sorry. As well as how the living spaces then are benefiting from that maximum light. Switch there, I'll fly through then. I'll just.
So yeah, I'll have to close down the presentation and try and load up because you've been having difficulties with the apps and everything. So if I'll try and do that in the background if there's any other questions.
Perhaps I just want to talk through some of the images while we try and load the fly through. So yeah, okay. I mean, the slide through is an animated CGI imagery of the scheme itself, so it takes you around it, so you can see it in the context of its neighbourhood. But yeah, I think we might struggle to get that to load on the IT systems chair, so it might just be worth.
Well, we can just go through the
just go through the images. Start with.
Chair, sorry.
Yes,
will we get an opportunity to ask some questions?
Yeah, we're just a few more slides now and we'll be at the end of our presentation. So I think, Peter, rather than loading you can just show the images and we'll go through those. Just while we're waiting for the images to load up, I mean, obviously the key aspect of the design in terms of the central open communal space at the heart of the scheme was very much at the forefront of the resident steering group discussions and took forward very much the integration of existing buildings within the Aintree estate and then the proposed two new buildings that were then coming online. At the centre of that site, we very much looked at focusing around the development of that internal space here. Through the introduction of a dedicated play area at the centre, as well as circulation and movement routes, which again was a key part of the discussions through the consultation and engagement process. But it was about security, safety, and a feeling of community at the very core of the design. So as well as obviously working to maximize sustainability and passive house principles about creating a more affordable and combating fuel poverty as part of the scheme design, it was very much creating a new communal presence within the heart of the scheme through the introduction of this area, and utilizing natural surveillance from the three aspects of the buildings that are then overlooking the site, speaking with the Metropolitan Police to develop a strategy for security, understanding the concerns in regards to local crime and antisocial behaviour, looking at measures to restrict moped use and cycle usage through the site, again, was a key part of the consultation feedback, as well as that element of surveillance and security such that parents and children can feel safe and utilise this open communal space. But as well as that was also then the other resident aspects of the site in terms of the play equipment and I think some gym equipment, as well as seating areas to bring the community heart together in the centre of the site. Next slide, please. So this again is just a view from Dawes Road then, with the communal open space to the left and the Bedford Arms to the right. And again, this touched on Neil's earlier points in regards to stepping of the building to be sympathetic to surrounding context, and working with the aspects in relation to, in this particular instance on Dawes Road, the suitability of projecting structurally independent balconies was not appropriate. So it wasn't just a case of taking a single rule and applying it to all aspects of the building, but understanding the surrounding context and being sympathetic to the design parameters and adapting the solutions then to suit those key considerations. Next slide. And then this is the Pellant Road aspect, and we've already touched on the key elements around insetting and setting back the 5th floor in regards to this, then the introduction of a tree-lined avenue and trees and planting was very much at the heart of the scheme design following the demolition of the existing towers. Insetting again the balcony connections here was another key aspect of it. It wasn't simply again about putting a series of projecting balconies that were then overshadowing neighbouring residents, but about being sympathetic to that, setting the building back, pushing the building line back, and then pushing the balconies into the building, but at the same time creating structurally independent balconies. And then I just think this is the final view, just from Dawes Road, again, just slightly to the right then is Bedford Arms. But again, this is touching on some of the security aspects of the site to reduce antisocial behaviour, being very mindful of natural surveillance and overlooking from three aspects of the site then, from the existing Chasemore and Donnelly house, but also the new development blocks there to create a safe and usable communal open space. Next slide. So just a brief summarization of the objectives and summaries of what we achieved. So we're delivering 134 new homes. 84% of those homes will be affordable. We're providing a high proportion of family homes, very much co-production, and the Defend Homes Council policy were at the very heart of the conversation from the initial conceptual discussions with the resident steering group right the way through to current discussions with contractors. Developing attractive buildings, utilising existing underutilised spaces, improving green space, and also knitting together of the existing residential accommodation, utilising passive house-led designs to target high carbon reduction measures, obviously new jobs generated during the construction phase, and promotes sustainable travel. Just the final slide then. Yeah. So then just looking at our current program then, we are at a process now, we've now achieved planning. So planning decision was granted on the 9th of February. Planning decision notice was received on the 9th of February. Procurement and approval of a contractor has now been undertaken, and the scheme is now going into detailed technical design with a projection of summer 2025 for completion. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I did say we'd talk enthusiastically about our schemes, didn't I? And
You did.
I'm glad we didn't disappoint on that basis. I guess we're now open to questions if we still have time.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you, officers, and thank you very much to all of our guests here. Everybody spoke with passion and immense pride. It was really lovely to see. Really interested to see how those constrictions and kind of challenges that were presented by residents were overcome through co-production, and how really co-production kind of enabled you to address those and to really incorporate them. That shone through. I was really pleased to hear that. I know that I have members here who are really keen to ask questions. Councillor Alexander, would you like to ask?
Thank you. So the questions I have sort of fall into a couple of key areas. First one is on the resident consultation, co-production, and this is really more towards the council officers. How much living space will we be getting? So normally we measure this in the density of population per acre, or the habitable rooms per acre, or whether you can use I'm happy to use acres or hectares, whatever unit you want to do. What did residents say that they wanted in terms of internal space, and what are we going to give them? Is there a difference? And then the other one is the outside space, and I'm not talking about the public outside space, is communal outside space, so people can meet with their neighbours, and they're shielded from the public. If we're going to have balconies, what size of balconies? Can we get a dinner table or stand kitchen table outside so people can sit there and have their sandwiches or whatever else? Will the density of population still allow for people to own cars or any other type of vehicles? The window sizes, again, how do the window sizes measure up to what the residents wanted? And how did that consultation go? Next one is ceiling heights. The passive house standards have quite a few different parameters. I'm very glad to see that we're adopting this. Well, it's quite a well-worn German standard these days, but you know it's definitely a good move, and you ought to be complimented on that. But so ceiling heights, and the ceiling heights, this is about the amount of air inside the flats, and the issues around because passive house implies a ceiling of the premises to permit only a small amount of air being exchanged per hours in order to meet some of the standards that you mentioned. So it's how much breathable air do we have in there, and obviously that amount of leakage will depend upon the volumetric size of the flats, which again goes onto the ceilings. I'm going to assume that if nobody says anything, there'll be 7'6" ceilings, which is kind of like the norm or the minimum you can have. Sorry, Chair, I'll get the other ones out. So or do you want to let somebody else have a go before I come back?
I think we need to give everyone a chance to answer, to start answering.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, Alexander.
So if I just add on to the passive house one, so currently our council are looking at improving properties to quite an old standard of 165 metre kilowatt hours per metre per year. And obviously I think the latest passive house ones are around 60 or 65 for new builds. And I think you mentioned, I can't remember which ones are. How achievable is that, and how much degradation will we have? Because we are a public sector housing organisation, and our maintenance will be trying to do all sorts of different things at the same time. So we can get something as simple as, we have to fit a carbon monoxide thing, and the contractor will just turn up with a Black & Decker drill and just go straight through the wall and bridge it out, which is a problem. So there's kind of quite a bit of control in there to maintain that standard. Then on the heat equipment and that thing, we really need to know the life cycle of the equipment we're installing, because that's going to determine our maintenance plans and at what point we change them over, and also whether we need to use a specialist contractor and the terms of those contracts before the equipment either becomes mechanically or technically obsolete, or by legislation. Sometimes quite often we find that particular types of equipment because legislation has moved on can't be used, or the manufacturer's gone broke and you can't get spares for it, and these other kinds of. So I'll leave it just at that bit before I come to the other two bits.
Thank you. So questions about ceilings, windows, light, eating, upkeep standards, and Matt, do you want to take this or start this?
Perhaps not all of them, Chair, and I might defer to colleagues to help me out with some of the more technical questions and responses. I just wanted to be absolutely certain. I was trying to jot them down, Councillor Alexander, as you were talking, and I want to make sure we understand them fully. So the first one was around space standards in the home and density within the home.
So probably your architects can just tell you what the density per unit area is. So quite often it'll be, it used to be sort of 70 or 80 people per acre or whatever, and that kind of a measurement. So basically it tells us how much space people have got, how much livable space, irrespective of the number, and then the number of habitable rooms. Bearing in mind that inevitably we're going to get overcrowding because we'll put a small family in a 2-bedroom flat, and lo and behold, they used to have 2 children, now they'll have 4 children, and it'll be a while before we can move them.
If I may, can I try not to? I haven't got the density of habitable rooms per hectare this evening, but we can work that out and get.
Did we ask residents that?
Sorry.
Did we consult residents on that?
Well, I think what new build is that all the new build are compliant with the nationally described space standards, and there are a set of standards which do accommodate more modern living. The accessible units in particular are built bigger, and the accessible group, a part of the co-production, were part of how they were designed to make sure that they were, large enough to live in, and with typical furniture layouts, as you can appreciate. Everybody will have a different furniture layout in the same flat. So all the new build homes are to nationally described space standards, which are, for example, on Hartop and Lanoy, a 1 or 2 bed flat, be it a 2-bed 3-person, 2-bed 4-person. They would be bigger than the ones that were previously in the Hartop and Lanoy Point flats as well.
Thank you for having a go. And if I may, I'll put that in writing via Richard and John at a later date, and just get it, because I think you haven't got it in front of you, and it's unfair to ask you to try and talk through it.
And Chair, in response to, I think there was a sort of related question, Councillor, about outdoor space. So again, the proportion of outdoor space, whether that's balcony or shared public amenity, is set out in national space standards. So that all of those homes are built to those standards as well.
Yeah, it was really getting to the point of whether we're going for the bare minimum national standard, or whether we're cognizant of the fact that we're almost in a London, and people need a little bit more elbow space. So that's why I was asking him, and what residents' expectations through the consultation process were.
Richard, would you like to add something?
Yeah, Chair and Councillor Alexander, I was wanting to talk about the maintenance. With new builds nowadays, you get a big manual, which I recall, which we used to have in St Albans, and what we will do is utilise that manual process and share that with the new contractor when these houses are built. Because you're right, what we don't want to happen is a contractor or subcontractor going in and actually ruin a passive home. We can't let that happen, and I won't allow that to happen on my watch. So I just want to make that quite clear. And what we will do is that John and I are already starting to work on what we need to think about in the new contracts, and making sure that it's fit for purpose for H&F, and not just an old contract and just regurgitate it. We've got to find a different way of doing it so that it actually focuses on H&F and it focuses on residents. As I said, the focus, what we are looking to do is becoming resident centric, and that's what we will undertake. So hopefully that answers your question about maintenance.
And Chair, part of that journey, I mean, part of it is design, The second stage for compliance is around construction. Part of it will also be around our education process with new residents. So it's making sure they understand how these new homes with new technology operate and how they can maximise the benefit to them and keep their energy bills reduced. And then we have to monitor that. So the end stage, which can't be forgotten, can it, Peter, is that there will be a legacy monitoring to make sure that the homes as they're built are used to their optimal performance from an energy perspective.
Thank you for that. I was actually wanting to ask a question myself about consumer understanding of passive house, and some of these will be market sales as well as affordable and social housing. And I wondered if we had an idea of what consumer understanding is of them and what demand might be, and how hard a sell that might be.
If I may, Matt. I think it's right. There is some education that needs to happen. I've done this in other parts of the country, and one of the things we've found is that yes, we have to make sure residents and people understand that the way we would live in a traditional house or flat, should I say, with a gas boiler and rads, is different when you're living in a very energy efficient home, using different technology that runs on sort of a lower heat and everything. Exeter Council are quite a way ahead of everybody else in the country regarding passive house. If you go into the Passive House Trust, they've done many schemes. And we have discussed things with them and liaised with them from an open market leaseholder point of view, and the risk around that. They suggest there's a 10% premium to be added, although we obviously haven't built that in. We've been prudent and haven't built that in, but that could emerge. But yes, I totally agree that there's different stages. One of the things we have done, and we mentioned it very briefly in the presentation, is that when I was talking about co-production, that's why I emphasised that yes, residents are at the heart of everything we do and they're engaged, but we have proactively engaged with our internal colleagues in housing, maintenance and repairs, because, and this is why it's so important that the Hartop and Annoy, along with Farm Lane and Lily Road that's currently in for planning, that are also achieving the same standards. They are used as schemes that we can learn from, not only from how they're used, but obviously how they're designed, and that can inform other developments and other life cycle costings going forward, because yes, that will change. What you're seeing here is, if we're sitting here in 10 years' time, this will be the norm, and what we currently do won't. So this will be business as normal in 10 years' time, and therefore, yes, it's a great opportunity to learn from that as well, and make sure that open dialogue and discussion is happening between departments, which it is, and so we can all learn from that, because there's new technologies, and as I say, the way we use buildings. Just to give you comfort as well, we also have got in place, obviously when we get there, when Hartop and Annoy is finished, there'll be a 5-year monitoring process. So when residents get the keys to their new homes, we'll obviously be keeping in touch anyway, but we'll be monitoring the performance actually of the homes and see how they perform. We can model and things, but how they actually perform, and there will be a variance depending on how people live and how they want to live, and that's why it's so important, as mentioned previously, when a lot of they won't have individual boilers in their homes anymore. It'd be a communal type boiler system or air source heat pump system, but with individual metering to allow variable service charge and that to be charged. So if someone wants to put their heating up all the time, they can do, but they have to pay for that proportionately. And if someone doesn't, then that so there'd be variable metering as well to the people and the people living in their homes to live how they want to live.
Thank you very much. Councillors. Councillor Alford.
Yes. On numerous occasions, but I'll just take a few parts of it. Firstly, you talk about having this filter system. and that you expect the residents to clean the filters in this new system. How are you going to ensure that that actually happens? And what are there going to be yearly checks, or is it just going to be left to hope that people will do the system?
If I may, thank you. So that's a very good example of what we've just been talking about. So the mechanical ventilation heat recovery units that are being put in. Just a bit of background first. The ventilation strategy of any project is dictated by air pollution, noise pollution, and as Emily pointed out, we're finding that a mechanical solution is becoming the norm now going forward. So yes, there's an extra bit of kit in a home that will be looked after on the affordable homes. That will be looked after by our teams, and that's part of this understanding. And what does that mean? Changing the filters on a regular basis, probably every 6 months, something like that. Yes, that brings other reasons for Hammersmith and Fulham to go back and into people's homes to do that repairs and sort of cyclical maintenance, should I say, and air source mechanical ventilation heat recovery is one of those bits of kit that will need that. Yes.
Has that been costed in?
Yes. Yes. So in now, without going into too much detail, when we have a viability for a new development, the rents received are net of contributions to maintenance, repairs and management. So the net rent we receive pays for the development. The bit that's the slice that's taken off goes into the wider business plan to look after the buildings for their life.
Those will be under service charges. These people will be charged for it under their service charge.
They're under normal, those particular items are under normal maintenance and repair, so that comes out of their rent. It's not particular to a service charge. There's certain aspects that will be related to a service charge. It will be no different to if you've got a boiler and rads at the moment, it'll be treated in the same way.
Right. What you haven't said, and I have been through this lots of times, is one, of course, your dates are slipping because you said you were starting in March and you're not. Secondly, it would have helped if you provided the number of flats and what they're made of. Are they 1, 2, 3, 4 bedroom flats? Because the thing about the old Lannoy and Hartop flats, though the building was a disgrace, the flats were extremely large and spacious and were highly loved by the residents, even if the whole place was falling down. Now, what hasn't been totally confirmed, I don't think, is whether you're going to have mainly 1, 2, 3, 4 bedroom flats. And as Councillor Alexander says, you put somebody in a 2-bedroom flat with 2 children and then they have 4, and we have automatic overcrowding. And I suppose I'll now address, before I finish, the 3 other points I'd like to make. The elephant in the room, which is always ignored, is the relationship with Chasemore and Donnelly. The fact you have 2 elderly blocks there, uninsulated, who've had to deal with the demolition of these blocks and now having to deal with the rebuild of these blocks, and virtually nothing has been done to compensate them. They have been just hung out to dry, and that is the feeling of my residents. And I suppose the final matter, which is slightly jumping, is I had hoped, but there clearly isn't time, to have gone through other bits of the redevelopments you were proposing in development programs like Egg City and Edith Summer School. Clearly there isn't time.
If I may, I can give you the numbers of the affordable portion on Hartop and Lannoy. So of the 67 genuinely affordable, 28 of those are 1 beds, 27 are 2 beds, and 12 are 3 bedrooms. And in the intermediate, i.e. the shared ownership, 22 are 1 beds, 19 2 beds, and 4 3 beds.
We need larger accommodation because some families have much larger families. Again, we're not catering for these people. And one of the biggest complaints I get is overcrowding. And why aren't we having any 4-bedroom flats to cater for larger families?
Councillor Orford, if I may, this is one scheme within the 16 and 17 sites of our development programme. It should be looked at as a programme as a whole. So there's a much broader range of family-sized homes across our development programme. We look at each scheme based on a number of different factors. One is looking to replace what was there previously. Another is to look at the needs in that local area. And the third thing is to look at the market costs of the homes if we're going to sell them, and what the residents who might move into the intermediate homes can afford. Typically, that tends to lean us further towards the smaller homes. When you get to the larger homes from an intermediate rent or shared ownership percentage, those homes become unaffordable and then can't be used for that purpose. So in answer, we can provide this information. The development programme does a much broader range of family-sized homes, but there is a high proportion of what we would describe as family-sized homes in this scheme.
Thank you very much. Richard, would you like to speak to that question at all?
If I may, Chair, if I can take it away and I can feedback, I think that's something which we do need to look at. You know, we can't have demolition occurring and have those residents feeling that we're not being listened to. So that's another action I will take on board tonight and look into it.
Thank you. Councillor Siddique.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Peter and Matt, for your excellent presentation this evening. And thank you for the partner teams for your comprehensive presentation as well. And I would like to comment, is more like a comment, so not the comment. I understand there's a lot of things we heard. In next 7 years, we'll have 1,133 houses in the borough, is a good thing. And then we'll have 600, I think 600 something figure, I lost somewhere, and it's 92 with the partnership. And we heard a lot of good things, especially coming partnership, like mechanical ventilation, community centers, and triple glazings, green spaces, and a lot of schools, and a lot of community centers, and nude styles. And these are all good things to hear about that. And can I ask you, is there anything about the parking, especially electric charges, parking, bike sheds, are there or in this development? And secondly, is there any homes which is compatible for the disabled residents? And is there any homes coming up for especially who's compatible for the older residents who need the carers to come all the time and care them? And is there this type of development, like you explained comprehensively by standing there, is there anywhere tried in the country already? Can you give us the example in any other council within the London or in the UK is already built this type of, buildings? That's all. If you, thanks.
Thanks, Councillor. I'll start off and then I'll defer to my colleagues again for some of the detail in response to that. So the council's planning policy is to promote active travel away from car travel, and all residential schemes in this borough now are what we would describe as generally zero car. So all of the general needs homes are built without additional new parking. Having said that, there will be parking spaces for residents with blue badges. And so on Hardtop and Lenai, I believe there are 13 spaces for people with blue badges. On the flip side, there will be an enormous amount of cycle parking that will be provided for residents within the scheme to promote active travel. We've probably got the numbers here. If we haven't, we could certainly provide those for you. In terms of, you mentioned disabled residents, Peter mentioned earlier in the scheme, all of our projects will include 10% of homes which are fully adapted for wheelchair use. And we'll work with our colleagues in housing allocations to match people who are on a housing register to those properties that need them the most. And we prefer, when developments come through from the private sector, when the council isn't doing it, that those homes are also affordable homes so that we can allocate residents with those needs to those homes as well. So there is a strong throughput. All of our homes are built to adaptable standards, which means they can be lifetime homes so that people whose needs change over time can still stay in the home that they're in. So that is the specification with which we build to now. In terms of specific older residents who may need specialist support in their home, it is something we're looking at the moment. We're at a relatively early stage in our journey. The team's been around for 3 years, and the principal focus at the moment has been on delivering new affordable homes to meet the needs of our housing register. But we're very keen and very excited as an organisation to work with our colleagues across adult social care and children's social care to look at a range of different supported housing. And that might be extra care housing for elderly residents with needs. It might be for children who are leaving care. It might be for people with learning difficulties. That's something we'd very much like to embed within our development programme in the future. And we're working at a really rapid pace at the moment with our colleagues across the organisation to see how we can design that into some of our future schemes. So not the ones that are at planning at the moment, but perhaps the ones that are an earlier stage of design. Or in fact, when we've gone round and we've looked at the borough and we've gone to explore future development sites, those things might come forward. And I know you mentioned the 1,333 homes that we're building as an authority, plus the 649, I think, if my memory serves me right, from the presentation earlier on. That's just the start. That's the start of what we want to do. Over the next 18 months, the team are going to go and we're going to look at all of the opportunities across the borough, all of the sites on our estates or land where the council owns. And we're going to look for opportunities for the next phase of projects to bring and build new affordable homes, new community infrastructure across the borough. Because as you say, we've said that as the next 0 to 7 years, there needs to be something that continues that journey onwards as we go forward.
Thank you very much. Can I ask if residents have any questions they'd like to ask? No. Thank you very much. Well, again, thank you all so much for coming along and speaking with us and taking us through those reports. It was everyone's been very generous with their time. Thank you to members, to the cabinet member, governance, and thank you to residents. I think that there are a number of questions that perhaps haven't been addressed, and perhaps they could be minuted, and officers could come back with some of those answers. Specifically, an answer from Councillor Alford around compensation for residents. For Councillor Alexander, who would like to know much more about living space and population density in the areas. For Councillor Sadiq, I think about the number of units, a little bit more information on that. And I would really appreciate being able to see how many completed units that have been over the last couple of years, how many completed affordable housing or social housing units that there are, and how many are in the pipeline. I would really appreciate being able to see that and share that in the minutes. Okay, lovely. The next meeting of the Housing and Homelessness Policy and Accountability Committee is the 25th of July, 2023. So I'd ask members to just put that date in their diary. I think there are the next few dates are also added to the minutes. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and thank you for everybody watching tonight's meeting on YouTube.